Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about responsive design and what to consider when you're designing for mobile screens. Thinking about what your design is going to look like on a mobile is a super important part of the design process. I mean, it's 2018, everyone is using their phones. So in this video, I'm going to give you 5 tips for things to look out for to make your mobile designs work really well. First off, just so that we're all on the same page, you might be wondering, what the heck is responsive design anyway? It's this term you've seen around a lot. What does it actually mean? Well, if a design is responsive, it means that the elements in it will resize depending on the browser width or height. Then there's also adaptive design, which means that instead of resizing at any point, there are predefined breakpoints in which your design will adapt to better fit the screen sizes. When I'm designing a site, I like to use adaptive design for larger screen sizes just because I feel like I can have more control over the design that way and how it's going to look for the end user. And then I use responsive design approach for smaller screen sizes where space is at a premium and everything's much more restricted. Got it? Good. Now let's talk about the 5 things you need to keep in mind to create a great design for a mobile screen. The first point is that you've got to consider how your design will look on small screens from the very start. This can't be something that you throw in at the end. You can't design and build out your whole desktop site and then think about it. It's really important to incorporate planning how it's going to work on mobile into part of your design process. So much of the web is viewed on mobile these days that it just can't be left as an afterthought. And the thing is that the way your website looks on mobile doesn't just have to be like this smaller, shrunken version of your desktop site. You can optimize for mobile, and a lot of people actually choose to take the approach of designing for mobile first because they say that it gets you to the root of like the simplest version of your design. Space is at a premium, you're really thinking about what's on screen at any given time. But even if you don't take a full mobile first approach, I often do still start with desktop, to be honest. I don't know if that makes me a bad designer. What I do is I have 2 artboards in Sketch when I'm designing. I have one that's at like a larger screen size, and then right next to it, I have a skinnier mobile version. So when I'm creating my components and designing them, I'm also planning how they're going to work on mobile right alongside it. I think considering the 2 extremes like this, the larger screen size, the smaller screen size, in tandem as I'm designing really helps my creative process, and it makes me consider mobile from the start. So I highly recommend you give it a try. Tip number 2 for designing with mobile, and this could actually be just a tip for designing for the web in general, is to use a grid. Grids are really important because they give your design structure and often make it much more balanced and visually appealing. I'm going to turn on the layers here in Sketch and you can see what a grid looks like over top of my design. But not only does using a grid help you with the visual design of your website, it also helps with the structure of how it's built and how your different elements can break down depending on, different screen sizes. I would say the best grid system for the web at the moment is Flexbox, and I would highly recommend you read up on it and just have an understanding of how it works so that as you're designing, you're keeping in mind how it's going to be built. And I've left a link down below in the description to where you can read up on that and learn more about it. I'm going to be demonstrating a few of the things that I'm talking about today by showing you a version of the ConvertKit features page that I've built out in Webflow. Webflow has Flexbox built in. It's like baked in as part of the system. So when you're using Webflow, you are using Flexbox. So let me give you an example of why grids are awesome and how they can help you with responding to different screen sizes. So here is my design in the desktop version. As you can see, I've got these 2 columns here, and then within this one column there is 2 smaller columns working with that grid. And if I go down and look at the preview of the mobile version of my site, as you can see here, these 2 columns get far too skinny, and I actually think I need them to stack instead. So something to be aware of when you're designing for mobile screens is that sometimes you might need to stack things rather than have them appear next to each other like you can on the larger screen sizes. So to sort this out, I'm just going to change the width to 100%. I'm going to change my container to be vertical. So there we go. Now instead of being too skinny, I can have my little feature blocks next to each other here on the desktop version of the site, and then stacking underneath each other really nicely on the mobile version. So the lesson here is 1, work the grid. It's going to make your design better and it's going to make your site easier to build. And then 2, don't be afraid to change things around on the mobile version of your site if that's what's going to work better. You need to be creating the design that works the best for the situation that the user is in. And in Webflow, I don't know if you noticed too, but see how I made that change to make these columns stack on mobile, but if I go back up to the desktop version, they're still side by side, and that's because any changes you make here on these different breakpoints, they only cascade down, if that makes sense. So yeah, because I changed it here on the smallest one, it doesn't affect anything above it. They're still side by side. You might have noticed as I was scrolling through that mobile example just there that some things looked a little bit off. And that is because another thing that you need to pay attention to when designing for mobile is sizing. As your screen gets smaller, you might need to make images or icons smaller as well to better suit the screen size. A good way to do this when working with images is to set, for example, a max width. Like, I don't want this image to go any bigger than 300 pixels, but when the screen gets smaller than that, the image can shrink down with it. Or you can use percentages in your image sizing. This is something I like to do. So this image here, for example, is set to be 100% the width of the integrations box that it's in. When you use percentages versus pixels, it's getting the size based on the width of the screen. And that integrations box is set to be 50% the width of the screen. So that means that as the screen gets smaller, this box will get smaller and the image will get smaller. Make sense? Now this is where, just like my last point, you'll want to adjust depending on the breakpoints or the screen sizes, because obviously 50% of this screen width looks far too small, whereas 50% on the wider screen looks pretty great. So instead what I'm going to do when we get to the screen size is make this box 100% width, and that's going to space everything out more. And like I was talking about before, that change will cascade down so that on my smaller screens it's still a good width. Let's just add some more space in here, shall we? There we go. Something else you might want to take a look at is the size of your headings. As you can see for this one here, I'm fitting not many words per line and it's looking a little bit weird with that easy integrations split out like that. So instead what I can do is just shrink the size of my heading 2 a little bit on mobile, just so things, don't seem so broken up. And as you can see, my logo is pushing my menu down below. That doesn't look great compared to up here where they're on the same line. So let's make this shrink a little bit smaller on mobile as well. So the lesson here is that as your screen gets smaller, some of your elements and your assets might need to get smaller as well. Using percentages is a great way to get things to respond to different screen sizes, because that percent will be judged based on the width. But don't be afraid to change what value that percentage is depending on the screen size. The fourth thing you really have to watch out for when you're designing for mobile is the navigation. Obviously, on a desktop view, you can have a row of links like this up the top. That's really useful. Your visitors can find their way easily to different pages on your site. But as your screen gets smaller, it's going to be impossible to have a row of links like that unless the font is really, really small, and then that's not very usable. So that's why things like the hamburger menu are really popular. How that works is basically on smaller screen sizes, it compresses your menu items into a drop-down of sorts. So if I click this icon here, all my menu items are still there, accessible behind this menu icon. Something else to consider, because I see this a lot in menus, is drop-downs working with a hover state. Hover states aren't really a thing on touchscreen devices, so make sure you keep that in mind when you're designing and thinking about how your menu is going to work. Make sure that it also works by clicking or tapping, not just on hover. And my last tip for you for this video anyway, is that you always need to be thinking about the user and their experience. When someone is using a mobile screen, it's not just that the screen is smaller. That's not the only change from your desktop site. Often the user is going to be in a different situation when they're using it as well. They might be out and about, might be on public transport, walking down the street. So you've got to optimize for getting the most relevant content to them quickly. Sometimes this might mean slightly changing your content depending on the screen size. I've got an example here of a page I've designed for Tradecraft, which is our monthly publication at ConvertKit. On the desktop version, you can see it says download the guide and there's like a little download arrow icon. But then if I show you a smaller screen size, that icon changes to a little email and it says get the full free guide. Both of these forms are the exact same, the same thing happens. But when you're on your phone, you don't really want to download something. That's not something that you do on a phone. So that makes that call to action less enticing if I'd left it saying download. So I changed it so that people on a phone will realize that it's going to be useful for them to click it too. So for a quick recap to end things off, the 5 things that I want you to take away from this video are that you need to consider what your design will look like on mobile right from the start of your design process. Involve it, don't just leave it to be an afterthought. Make sure you're designing using a grid and don't be afraid to change the width of columns, to stack things on mobile, whatever you need to make it work best for that smaller screen size. If you use percentages for the widths on your elements, they'll respond to the different screen sizes really well. And again, don't be afraid to change those percentages up to work better on smaller screens. You're probably going to need to collapse your navigation for mobile screens and make sure that all of the links that you're using in it have enough space around them that they're tappable. And lastly, remember that if your user is viewing your site on a smaller screen size, that might mean they're in a different situation to viewing on a desktop as well. So design for that, adapt content to fit it. Hopefully those 5 tips are going to help you with your web design process and help you make better designs for mobile screens. I've left some links in the description for resources that I might have mentioned during this video that I think you should check out. They're going to be very useful. If you've got any questions though on anything that I covered, if anything wasn't unclear or you just want me to go into further detail on it, please feel free to ask them down below in the comments. I'd love to try and help you out down there. I want to say a big thank you to Webflow as well for sponsoring this video and just for in general making a really great website building tool that is super easy to adapt your design for mobile on. Thank you to you as well for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure you give it a thumbs up if you did. And if you hit subscribe, if you're not already, I make new design videos every single week. So hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.